Good afternoon. I will start with a statement on the situation in Venezuela. We're concerned at the latest developments in Venezuela and urge that all efforts be made to lower tensions and prevent further clashes. We call on the government of Venezuela and the opposition to engage sincerely to reactivate dialogue efforts, especially around the critical issues that they had already agreed to and to place on the agenda, namely the balance of power among the branches of the state, the electoral calendar, human rights, truth, justice, and the socioeconomic situation. We call on concrete measures from all parties to reduce polarization and create the necessary conditions to address the country's challenges for the benefit of the Venezuelan people. And as part of the Secretariat's ongoing review of costs and the use of resources provided by member states, the Secretary General today launched an initiative to reduce costs by increasing the efficiency of the use of our air assets. The UN currently deploys 58 fixed-wing and 157 rotary-wing aircrafts in 12 peacekeeping missions and 6 special political missions. The annual cost of the use of these aircraft was close to $750 million in 2015-2016. While these assets provide essential logistics and military enabling capabilities, given their significant cost implications, the Secretary General has asked the head of the field missions to systematically analyze and adjust the composition and utilization of their air fleet and to seek alternative solutions that may be cost-effective. This is also an opportunity for missions to innovate. Mandate delivery is, of course, the core of defining logistics, and safety must remain paramount. As the analysis is ongoing, the Secretary General requested with immediate effect that passenger movements be limited to critical mandate tasks, non-mission passengers be reduced, and schedules be more finely tuned to allow for reduced fleets. Special flights must also become the exception. Secretary General said that the Secretariat bears a great burden of responsibility when it comes to the judicious use of funding and assets provided to by member states, and he has asked the Department of Field Support to lead and coordinate this initiative from headquarters. And the Secretary General will be in Switzerland starting April 24th, where he will meet with the President of the Swiss Confederation, Doris Leuthard, the Swiss Foreign Minister, Didier Burkhalter, and the leadership of the External Relations Committee of both chambers of Parliament, and that will be in the Swiss capital, Bern. And on the 25th of April, the Secretary General will preside over the high-level pledging conference for the humanitarian crisis in Yemen, with the foreign ministers of Switzerland and Sweden as co-chairs, and he is expected to address the press afterwards, and that will take place in Geneva. And on the 26th and 27th of April, he will be meeting with the UN Systems Chief Executive Board for Coordination, otherwise known as the CEB, which brings together all the heads of UN funds, programs, and specialized agencies. And the Secretary General will be back in the office in New York on Friday, the 28th of April, if that is indeed Friday. Yes, thank you, Joe. And continuing on Yemen, the humanitarian coordinator for the country has authorized the first 217 allocation of the Yemen Humanitarian Fund for $50 million. These funds will go towards addressing the immediate causes of food insecurity and malnutrition by ensuring access to food, nutrition, health, and sanitation for the most vulnerable people. They will also be part of the integrated response for the most vulnerable internally displaced people, returnees, and host communities by providing shelter, food, water, and other items. And the UN mission in South Sudan has received reports of fighting between government and opposition forces around Attar and Owachi in the Upper Nile region. A UN patrol to Kodok yesterday observed that the town was deserted and saw no civilians. In eastern Equatoria, a UN patrol to Puji, south of Pajok, yesterday met with civilians who reported that the Sudan People's Liberation Army soldiers had looted houses and government offices, as well as health facilities during recent military operations in the area. The UN mission calls on the government to investigate these reports and bring those responsible to justice. Meanwhile, in Marang and Jonglei, the SPLA prevented UN peacekeepers from proceeding on a patrol and forced them to return to base after unsuccessful negotiations. The mission once again calls on the government to facilitate full action access, as obligated to by the Status of Forces Agreement, it can implement its mandate, including the protection of civilians. And as you just saw, Nikolai Mladenov briefed the Security Council in his role as Special Coordinator for the Middle East. He said at the outset of today's meeting that a perfect storm had engulfed the Middle East and continues to threaten international peace and security. Millions have been displaced in the biggest refugee crisis since the Second World War. He added that the question of Palestine remains a potent symbol and rallying cry that is easily misappropriated and exploited by extremist groups. Ending the occupation and realizing a two-state solution will not solve all of the region's problems, he said, but as long as the conflict persists, it will continue to feed them. Mr. Mladenov also briefly touched upon the recent reports of alleged use of chemical weapons in Syria. If confirmed, he said this abhorrent action would amount to a serious violation of international law and present a threat to international peace and security. He also expressed the hope that the Security Council can unite to send a strong collective message that the perpetrators of such attacks will be held accountable. His remarks are in my office and the meeting is ongoing. And from Syria, yesterday, 500 people from Zabadani, Madaya, Sargaya, and the surrounding areas in Syria were evacuated to Idlib governorate simultaneously with 3,000 people from Foa and Kafraya who were evacuated to Jibrin outside of Aleppo city. With those evacuations, the town of Zabadani is reported to have been completely emptied. People evacuated from Foa and Kafraya to the Al-Mahalej shelter in Jibrin are being provided with food, water, emergency items, and health services supplied by the UN and our partners through the Syrian Arab Red Crescent. People displaced from Madaya and Zabadani to Idlib are being assisted by cross-border NGO through 2 reception centers. The UN, as we have said, is not a party to the negotiations, the agreement, or the evacuations, but stands ready to continue to assist people in need with humanitarian assistance wherever they may be. UN emphasizes that any evacuation of civilians must be safe, voluntary, and to a place of their choosing. All those who are displaced through such local arrangements have the right of return as soon as the situation allows it. And our colleagues from the UN mission in Libya are following with great concern the tense situation in and around Tamanhint, where intermittent fighting continues to be reported. They are deeply worried about the impact of this heightened violence having on the lives of the residents of the south of Libya. The UN mission has received reports of food, water, medicine shortages, as well as increased electricity cuts. There are also reports of families fleeing their homes to Saba and Ubari. The humanitarian coordinator, Maria Dovale Ribeiro, is working closely with UN agencies and humanitarian workers, continue to provide assistance. She calls on all the parties to immediately cease hostilities to prevent further unacceptable human suffering. And I want to flag a new tool offered by the FAO using real-time satellite data to track water productivity in agriculture. The WAPOR Open Access Database went online live as of today, tapping satellite data to help farmers achieve more reliable agricultural yields and allowing for the optimization of irrigation system. The program covers Africa and the Near East with a focus on countries that are projected to soon face physical or infrastructural water scarcity. More information online. And a paper released today by UNESCO shows the number of university students has doubled to 207 million between 2000 to 2014, but governments are struggling to keep pace with the growing demand for higher education. The paper, entitled 6 Ways to Ensure a Higher Education That Leaves No One Behind, makes a series of recommendations to make higher education more equitable and affordable. Mr. Klein.
Thank you. Your statement on Venezuela was fairly general and sort of called on both sides to move back to a dialogue, et cetera. But I want to ask you specifically for comment on the announcement by the government, I believe within the last couple of days, that it intended to arm a militia with guns that had been previously seized from citizens in Venezuela, and that might entail thousands and thousands of people being armed, presumably to be used for intimidation. And secondly, news that I just saw of the seizure of a GM plant in Venezuela by the government. I mean, could you elaborate on this? Because it would seem that the government here is actually the
I haven't
bad actor.
I haven't seen the report of the GM plant, so I can't comment on it. We're obviously concerned by the violence that we've seen, notably, I think the number of deaths in demonstrations yesterday. I think there are more demonstrations scheduled for today, and we're following that closely. As a matter of principle, we're always concerned and look at issues of extrajudicial militias and the impact that it would have on people's rights. Matthew.
I'm going to ask you something about Cameroon, but given that you've now confirmed that that the Secretary General is going to the CEB meeting, I wanted to ask you what I asked yesterday, which is, number one, whether WIPO is the host, two, whether the Secretary General is aware of the retaliation issues that have been raised by the Government Accountability Project and others about Mr. Guri, and three, is it true that the meeting will, after the first day of convening, move to a quote, a described luxury hotel in Montreux? And if so, what are the costs of the meeting, given what you said about air travel?
The first day of the meetings will be held at WIPO. I think everyone is aware of the issues that have taken place in WIPO. The second half of the meeting is being hosted by the Swiss authorities.
In Montreux?
Indeed.
Okay. And what I want to ask you about Cameroon is that there's a report, there seems to be back and forth. Doctors Without Borders has said that they have witnessed and can attest to the refoulement of refugees from Cameroon back into Nigeria. So I wanted to know, I've asked about it before, and it seemed to have been unclear at that time. And I also want to, again, ask, I guess I'd like you to confirm or deny. Jeune Afrique, a respected publication, has said that the Secretary General tried to reach Paul Biya. And I wanted to know, now especially, that it could be about one of either two issues, either the cutoff of the Internet for 92 days or this refoulement issue. Can you give some guidance of what the Secretary General's thinking is on these two issues, and whether he raised it yesterday with the African Union?
On the meeting with the African Union was very broad. They went through a number of issues that are pertinent to the African Union UN partnership. As a matter of course, we try to announce when we feel it's necessary phone calls that have happened. I'm not going to go into details of phone calls that have not happened. And on the issue of the refoulement, we of course stand against any refoulement which is against the 1951 Convention on Refugees. On this particular case, I would ask you to ask UNHCR, which obviously is more involved in this than we are from here.
And just on the AU meeting, I wanted to ask this yesterday. Did the issue of Burundi come up? Given that there is supposed to be AU monitors there, and there's also a UN mission, both seem to be getting rebuffed. Were any decisions made between the two?
There was a wide exchange of views on all sorts of countries, and I do believe that Burundi did come up. Yeah, in the back. Sorry, Linda.
On a follow-up on Venezuela, has the Secretary General talked to the Venezuelan authorities, or can we expect any sort of action, especially on this militia issue? I believe the Colombian Foreign Minister raised this with the SG.
Yes, the situation in Venezuela that did. I believe they come up yesterday in the meeting. As we have more to say, we will announce it. But obviously, we also have a UN country team on the ground in Venezuela. Linda.
Thank you, Steph. Regarding the quarterly debate that's taking place right now in the Middle East, we know that it generally focuses only on the Israeli-Palestinian crisis, and now U.S. Ambassador Nikki Haley is pressing for an expansion of the discussion beyond the Israeli-Palestinian crisis to include, she said, particularly Iran and Iran's support of Hezbollah and Hamas, etc. I was just wondering if the SG, has a point of view on this issue.
Well, I think, listen, I would refer you back to what Mr. Mladenov said, and if you look at the remarks he delivered, which were broader than they usually have been in this context, while he did, of course, focus on his particular mandate, which is the Middle East peace process. The Security Council sets its own agenda, and we brief as requested in a matter requested.
Just as a follow-up
Sure.
on that, because I did listen to his speech, and maybe I missed it, but I didn't hear him make any specific reference to Iran and its role in supporting terrorist groups like Hezbollah and Hamas, which do relate directly to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. So, was that intentional or an
I think
oversight?
as I mentioned, his statement was broader than usual. Some people may have wished it to be even broader, and others may have wished it to be narrower. We chose our own path. Yes, sir.
Sure. Thanks a lot. I want to ask you, there was a press conference here at 10 o'clock by the Watch List on Children in Armed Conflict and Save the Children, and both of them were pretty strenuous in saying that the Saudi-led coalition should be listed by the Secretary General in this annex. I wanted to, I guess I don't expect you to preview it, but I'd like to ask you a couple of things. One, is it the case that Virginia Gamba will in fact assume her work on May 1st, and if so, will she be the primary one making the recommendation to the Secretary General? Two, and this is not related to the press conference, can you confirm that those considered for the position involved Yang Hee Lee and also Mr. Alan Rock? And how would you respond, if so, to the idea that Ms. Gamba, despite her work on the gym, has not really viewed as a child advocate? So I guess I have another NGO question, but those are about,
I think Ms. Gamba will stay on at the gym for another few weeks or a couple of weeks. I don't know the exact date of her start time. In the meantime, the Secretary General we're looking at the people to succeed her. The office, the special representative isn't alone in that office. There is a deputy special representative. There's a chief of staff. They're continuing their work, obviously in preparation for the report, which will come out later this year. And so she will be as soon as she assumes her job, she will take over the position and assume that responsibility as the Secretary General's principal advisor on issues of children in armed conflict. I think Ms. Gamba is an extremely experienced and talented international civil servant who's had wide experience, and I think will be a great leader to that office and a great advocate for children, for the protection of children.
Okay, and I wanted to ask you, this is also a different NGO, Amnesty International, you may have heard of, has issued a call saying that the UN mission for the referendum in Western Sahara, MINURSO, should have a human rights monitoring function. And I've seen a copy. I'm not sure if you can say what the status of the Secretary General's report is. Is it now officially?
Yeah, the report.
Okay.
I mean,
all right.
so
I want to make sure that the one that I've seen is
I would refer you to the report.
Since is it fair to say that he's not recommending a human rights monitoring function for the mission? And if so, why not?
I think it's fair to say that the report speaks for itself.
Right. So he's not recommending it.
You do the analysis,
right.
And we've written the report. Thank you.